The history of psychology, it's quite obvious that people must always have been perfectly efficient, practical psychologists. People were no stupider than we are. And in their personal relationships, they must have had a very, very shrewd idea of what people's motives were, etc., etc. But of course, their official psychology was incredibly crude, but every now and then you got a literary psychologist who was about 400 years ahead. I don't know. I mean, well, of course, you've just got to compare Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson, being a scientific psychologist, I mean, who followed the whole doctrine of humour as you find it expressed in Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, and there was a fully worked out psychological theory. It didn't happen to be a very good one. I mean, even a sort of psychosomatic theory too, which didn't happen to be very good, and it didn't happen to be very helpful. But nevertheless, I mean, in spite of the bad official psychological theory, I'm quite sure that most people with a reasonably good intelligence and intuition were extremely shrewd practical psychologists. They probably knew about it, but nobody had written it down. Many of the findings of Pavlov and his dogs were well anticipated, I mean, empirically. I mean, Dr. William Sargent, in his book, The Battle for the Mind, has a most interesting chapter on Wesley's method of converting people, persuading and converting people, and showing that how closely it's related to these methods which Pavlov used later on with dogs, and which, of course, findings, of course, which proved to be extremely useful in the cure of shell shock and battle fatigue in the 2 world wars. I mean, there is no doubt that people empirically hit on all kinds of things, and it was only in much later times that the theoretical raison d'etre of what they were doing was gradually emerged and came into clear consciousness.
Speaking as yourself, speaking also as a member of your generation, how serious, how enduring was the impact on your mind of Freud?
I was never as intoxicated by Freud as some people were. I mean, I thought, and I get less intoxicated as I go on. I mean, I think he omitted so much from his purview of human beings. I mean, this fact that he really leaves completely out of account the whole physical side of man. I mean, to listen to Freud, you would think that man had only 2 points in his anatomy. The 2 ends of the digestive tube, I mean, the mouth and the anus. I mean, nothing else exists in the Freudian anatomy at all. And yet there is a good deal in between, and we know very well that there are many things on the neurological and biochemical level which profoundly affect our minds. But Freud, and although he did himself say that he finally all nervous disorders would turn out to be organic, but he did say that in the meanwhile, until we found out more about them, we could treat them successfully by purely psychological means. I think this is absolutely untrue. And his followers, of course, dogmatically insist upon this. I mean, in the most ridiculous way. The orthodox Freudians, well, thank heaven, most psychotherapists are not orthodox Freudians now. They are eclectics and making use of organic and chemical methods and psychological and sociological methods which guarantee a cure, which the pure Freudian doesn't get with his 8 years on the couch. More and more, as I learn more about what is happening now in the field of neurology and biochemistry, and in the general study of human physique and the classification of human types, I feel more and more strongly that you have to have the total organic approach. I mean, this is trying to see the thing as a totality. I mean, it's just, we have to make the best not only of both worlds, but of all the worlds. Man is a multiple amphibian who lives in about 20 different worlds at once. And if anything is to be done with him to improve his enjoyment of life, to improve the way he can realize his desirable potentialities, to improve his health, to improve the quality of his relations with other people, to improve his morality. We have to attack on all the fronts at once. And we have the greatest, what may be called the original sin of the human mind, is sloth, it's oversimplification. We want to think that there is only one cause for any given phenomenon, therefore there is one cure. There is not, and this is the trouble, that no phenomenon on the human level, which is a level of immense complexity, can ever have a single cause. I mean, we must always take at least half a dozen conspiring causal factors into consideration, and any attempt to improve human life has to take into account the psychological factors, the sociological factors, the physical factors, the chemical factors, all of them. Practically, you see, I mean, the trouble with the Freudians is that they took only one set of factors into account. Well, of course, their system doesn't work at all well in practice. So that this, as I say, is the sort of intellectual and scientific correlate of my feeling that the highest forms of art are those which impose a kind of harmony and order upon the greatest possible number of factors.